way shown by our Creator, Allah the Almighty. Ahlul Bayt Association organized an international webinar on Imam Rahil, the man who changed the world. Ruhollah Khomeini's life in exile was the period that the Grand Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini spent his exile from 1964 to 1979 in Turkey, Iraq, and France. After Muhammad Raza Shah Pahlavi, the last king of the family kingdom of 2500 years, had arrested him twice. On 4th November 1964, Imam Khomeini was secretly taken to Ankara, Turkey. On 5th September 1965, he moved to Najaf, Iraq, and stayed there until Saddam Hussein deported him. Finally, he was exiled by the pressure of Muhammad Raza Pahlavi to Paris in October 1978. Imam Khomeini was invited back to Iran by the oppressed people, and he returned to Tehran from Paris in 1979. Today, we have very distinguished guests from all over the world. My first honorable guest, born in 1963 in Tehran, he started his education from the City of Islamic Knowledge and Ijtihad to pursue higher education in Islamic studies. He was the head of the Center for Statistics and Information in Judicial System of Iran and was also the head of the Center of Computer Research Islamic Sciences. He was likewise a member of the Supreme Council of Cyberspace, playing leading role in different organizations. I would like to request Hujjatul Islam, Dr. Hamid Shahriari, currently the Secretary General of the World Forum for Proximity of Islamic Schools of Thoughts. Dr. Hamid Shahriari.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا وإن الله لمع المحسنين. And as for those who strive hard for us, we will most certainly guide them in our ways, and Allah is most surely with the doers of good. Surah Al-Ankabut, Ayah 69. The days of the departure of the brave champion, the enlightened scholar and divine jurist, the great Islamic reformer Imam Khomeini Rahmatullah alayh, have once again mourned and saddened the hearts of believers and those who are devoted to the dignity of Islamic Ummah. I take this opportunity to greet the high and divine spirit of this virtuous servant of Allah, the great reformer and reviver of Islamic thought and the dignity of the Islamic Ummah. And I ask Allah the Almighty, the highest ranks and divine paradise, for that great, wise, and trained leader of the school of Islam and the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. And also I thank the organizer of this valuable Congress and wish them success and thanks the presence of scholars and thinkers in presenting their useful and constructive discussions. Allah Almighty has promised that those who rise in jihad in His way will enjoy His guidance and support. Imam Khomeini Rahmatullah alayh was a great devoted champion who spent his whole life in scientific and practical jihad against the foundation of liberal and materialist ideas and the misguidance and oppression of the oppressors and the tyrants and ill-wishers of the Islamic Ummah. He who entered this jihad pure and faithful, God opened the way for him that provided him with victory and success. And he overcame and exalted the great powers empty-handed. In a day when Western civilization cut off man and the world from the heaven and the called religion as the opium of the masses, and removed God and spirituality from the sphere of society, or pushed them to margins of life, he arose relying on God and correct understanding and strong faith, and honored the religion and spirituality, and honored the pious and the believers, and challenged the materialistic and the liberal schools, the achievement of which was man lost and cut off from revelation, and gathered the attention of the pure natures and susceptible populations to religion and divinity, and thanks to his faithful strife, the centers and places for worship and devotion flourished. He has rightly revived spirituality and religion in the contemporary world. In the materialistic, bipolar world, he proposed the theory of religious government and a dynamic and living religion in order to direct the world, immersed in the operation of the arrogant and thirsty for justice to the main center of power, namely Allah the Almighty. Hence, he was hated by the system of domination and arrogant states, but the masses of people, right-wingers and justice seekers, found him the embodiment of goodness and justice and the path of salvation and liberation. And despite the propaganda of the media and the apparatus of domination system, devoted themselves to him and named him the model of justice in the contemporary world. The global arrogance and the enemies of Islam, who feared the unity and cohesion of the Islamic Ummah, saw Imam Khomeini's life as a great obstacle to the colonization and plundering of Islamic lands, and the continuation of their domination over Islamic lands, and the continuation of domination of dictatorship. And by launching the Islamophobia movement and introducing the fake face of Islam with titles such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they tried to introduce Islam as a religion and a school of violence and an obstacle to development of progress. And with this cunning and shameful act, they paved the way for Western culture. They continued their domination and deprived the Muslims of their rich material and spiritual resources. Imam Khomeini believed that Westerners have tried to deprive us of ourselves, to empty us, to make us understand that you are nothing and that everything is the West and they must follow the West. And as we see in the words of the wise leader of Islamic revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini, Imam Khomeini considered the unity of the Islamic Ummah as the way to save and sterilize the conspiracy of arrogance and the return of Muslims to a spiritual, scientific, and political dignity and authority by identifying and reviving Islamic values and promoting Islam. Therefore, the plan to divide and create ethnic, nationalist, and religious divisions and sectarianism and the departure of Muslims from Islamic values and culture was considered a conspiracy of the West and colonialism. And he called on scholars and elites of the Islamic world to fight against these conspiracies. He cleverly declared the most important danger of the Islamic world and the presence of the fake Zionist regime of Israel to advance the intentions of domination system to divide and plunder the resources of Islamic countries and established a base for them and called on the entire Muslim Ummah to get rid of this cancer. Today, the invitation of that great man and wise and far-sighted devotee was accepted by the justice seeker sons of that immigrant to Allah and the wise old man, and they promised the honorable jihad to overthrow and eliminate this racist and fake regime. Courageous strive and the resistance of justice seekers, sons and followers of the path of honor and the path of dear Imam Khomeini promises a new civilization based on Islam and the formation of a great union of Islamic countries by bringing the hearts of the Muslim nation to the pure blood of the martyrs of resistance and defenders of Islamic unity. God willing, thanks to the pure selves of the believers of the Islamic Ummah and the martyrs of the resistance and jihad of the fighters in the shadow of the enlightened teachings of the Prophet of Mercy and the Holy Quran, we will soon see the collapse and elimination of this cruel regime. This enlightened path of unity, resistance, and jihad is the path and invitation of the great Imam and the herald of peace and Islamic dignity. Once again, we send greeting to the high spirit of that wise scholar and great reformer, and we ask Allah the Almighty to exalt his ranks and the success of his successor, Imam Khomeini, in continuing this enlightened path. May the peace and mercy and blessing of Allah be upon you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Imam Khomeini woke up the Islamic Ummah, not just the Shia Muslims, but even the Sunni Muslims. Imam Khomeini not only changed the Muslim world, but he also changed the entire world for the betterment through his movement. Hujjatul Islam Qaisar Abbas, following Imam Khomeini's thoughts throughout his life, following his path, and established a lot of humanitarian work. I would like to request Hujjatul Islam Qaisar Abbas from USA to participate in this webinar. The man who changed the world.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فضل الله المجاهدين على القائدين أجرا عظيما. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. On behalf of Ahlul Bayt Association Portugal, I would like to welcome and thanks all scholars, our respected guests and participants in this webinar that is going to held to commemorate and recall our great leader, Hazrat Ayatullah al-Uzma, Rahbar Inqilab, Imam Khomeini Rizwanullah Ta'ala alayh. Imam Khomeini Rizwanullah alayh की याद में मुनअक़िदा इस प्रोग्राम में हम तमाम सामईन व हाज़रीन व नाज़रीन को खुशामदीद कहते हैं। हमारी खुशकिस्मती है कि हम उस ज़माने में रह रहे हैं, उस असर में ज़िंदगी कर रहे हैं जिसे असर इमाम ख़ुमैनी कहा जाता है। इसलिए कि इमाम ख़ुमैनी ने दौर हाज़िर में उन तमाम तालीमात का इहया किया है ان تمام پیغامات کو زندہ کیا ہے جو اولیاء اللہ کے پیغام ہیں، جو اہل بیت کا پیغام ہے اور جو انبیاء کا پیغام ہے۔ اس دور میں جب مسلمان اپنی آئیڈینٹی اور اپنی شناخت کھو رہے تھے اور مختلف قسم کے اسکول آف تھاٹ، چاہے وہ سیکولر تھے، لبرل تھے، نیشنلسٹ تھے، وہ مسلمان نوجوانوں کو اپنے احاطہ فکری میں لے رہے تھے۔ اس زمانے میں امام نے اسلام کے اس عظیم پیغام کو زندہ کیا جو پیغام حقیقتاً ہمارے اپنے اسلامی حلقوں میں بھی معدوم ہو رہا تھا۔ امام خمینی کے علمی کارناموں کے بارے میں گفتگو، ان کی عملی زندگی کے بارے میں گفتگو، ان کے فقہی، عرفانی اور تفسیری کلام کے بارے میں گفتگو کا وقت نہیں ہے۔ امام خمینی نے جو عظیم خدمات اسلامی امت کے لیے انجام دی ہیں، اور ہر مسلمان، اس دور میں رہنے والا ہر مسلمان ان گراں قدر خدمات پر اس مرد عظیم الشان کا شکر گزار ہے۔ ان خدمات میں سے ایک بہت بڑی خدمت حکومت اسلامی کا قیام تھا۔ وہ سب سے اہم اسلامی فریضہ جو مسلم معاشروں میں فراموش کیا جا رہا تھا، بھلایا جا رہا تھا، جس کے بارے میں مسلم امہ متوجہ نہیں تھی، جس کے بارے میں ہمارا نوجوان متوجہ نہیں تھا۔ حالانکہ اسلامی تعلیمات کی بنیاد، اسلامی احکام کی بنیاد اجتماعیات پر ہے۔ اسلام حقیقت میں وہ دین ہے جس کے دل میں سیاست ہے، اور سیاست وہ ہے جس کے دل میں دین ہے۔ البتہ وہ سیاست جو الہی سیاست ہو، وہ سیاست جس کا مقصد انسانوں کو انسانوں کی غلامی سے نجات دلانا ہو اور انہیں حقیقی آزادی کا پیغام دے کر خدا کی بندگی کی طرف لانا ہو۔ حکومت اسلامی یعنی ایک ایسے معاشرے کی تشکیل جس میں آئین کی پاسداری کی جا رہی ہو، جس میں احترام آدمیت ہو، جس میں سب کے لیے عدل ہو، جس میں سب لوگ مظلوم کے ساتھ کھڑے ہوتے ہوں۔ وہ معاشرہ جس میں ظالم کے لیے کوئی جگہ نہ ہو، وہ معاشرہ جس کی بنیاد اسلامی اور انسانی اور الہی اقدار پر ہو۔ ایسے معاشرے کی تشکیل اور ایسی حکومت کا قیام اسلامی احکام اور واجبات میں سے سب سے اہم واجب ہے، جس کو مسلمان امت من حیث الامت فراموش کر چکی تھی۔ امام خمینی رضوان اللہ علیہ نے اپنی ان عظیم قربانیوں کے ساتھ، ان عظیم زحمات کے ساتھ اس فکر اسلام کو زندہ کیا اور مسلمانوں کو متوجہ کیا کہ وہ دین جو سیاست کے بغیر ہو، البتہ الہی سیاست، نہ وہ سیاست جس کی بنیاد ظلم ہے، جس کی بنیاد انسانوں کو دھوکہ اور فریب دینا ہے، نہ وہ سیاست جس کی بنیاد ایک خاص گروہ، ایک خاص نسل، ایک خاص طبقے کی حاکمیت ہو، بلکہ الہی سیاست جس کا سب سے بنیادی محور اور اساس عدل ہے، جس کے قیام کے لیے اللہ نے تمام انبیاء کو بھیجا ہے۔ وہ نظام عدل، وہ پیغام عدل جس کے لیے اہل بیت نے ایفرٹ کی، جس کے لیے اولیاء اللہ نے اپنی جانیں قربان کی ہیں۔ پس حکومت اسلامی کی تشکیل کا سب سے بڑا مقصد معاشرے میں نظام عدل کا احیاء ہے، نظام عدل کو قائم کرنا ہے۔ آج کی نسل، آج کا نوجوان آج کا مسلمان اس بات پر افتخار کرتا ہے، اس بات پر اپنا سر شان و شوکت سے اٹھا سکتا ہے کہ الحمدللہ ہم عصر امام خمینی میں رہ رہے ہیں، جنہوں نے عملی طور پر اگرچہ ایک چھوٹے سے ایک محدود سے خطے میں، ایک محدود سے سرزمین میں اسلام کی ان عظیم اقدار کو زندہ کیا، اسلام کے اس نظام عدل کا نفاذ کیا، اس حکومت اسلامی کی تاسیس کی۔ عزیزو، آج کے دور میں بھی اگر مسلمان جو عصر حاضر میں ہر طرح سے پستی کا شکار ہوئے ہیں، حالانکہ ہمارے ریسورسز، ہماری توانائیاں سب سے زیادہ ہیں، لیکن یہ سب کے سب توانائیاں اس کی بجائے کہ ہمیں عزت عطا کرے، من حیث القوم ہمارے لیے پستی اور ذلت کا سبب بن رہی ہیں۔ اس کی وجہ یہ ہے کہ ہم نے اسلام کے اس عظیم فریضے کو، اس عظیم حکم الہی کو پس پش ڈال دیا ہے۔ آج کے علماء، آج کے قائدین، آج کے مفکرین اگر امام خمینی کی اس روش پر، جو حقیقت میں اولیاء اللہ کی روش ہے، جو ائمہ اہل بیت کی روش ہے، جو انبیاء الہی کی روش ہے، یعنی معاشرے کے اندر عدل کا قیام، اسلامی حکومت کا قیام، اگر ہر معاشرے میں، ہر سوسائٹی میں اس اہم فریضے کی تکمیل کے لیے افراد اپنی کاوشیں، اپنی ایفرٹس، اپنے ریسورس صرف کریں تو یقیناً یہ دنیا تبدیل ہو جائے گی۔ اس وقت حقیقی معنی میں یہ دنیا تیار ہو جائے گی اس جہانی عدل کے نظام کو ویلکم کرنے کے لیے، جو اس زمانے میں امانت الہی، جو خدا کے نمائندے، جو بقیت اللہ نے آ کر پوری دنیا میں قائم کرنا ہے۔ خدا انشاءاللہ ہم سب کو توفیق دے کہ ہم اس عظیم کاروان کا حصہ بن سکیں، جس کاروان نے ہر معاشرے میں، ہر سوسائٹی میں، ہر قوم میں عدل کے علم کو بلند کرنا ہے، جس نے مظلوم کے ساتھ کھڑے ہونا ہے، جس نے ظالم کو للکارنا ہے، اور جس نے یقیناً اس کاروان کا حصہ بننا ہے جس کے حصے میں خدا نے وہ نہائی کامیابی لکھ دی ہے۔ ان تنصر اللہ ینصرکم، اگر تم اللہ کی مدد کرو گے تو خدا تمہاری مدد کرے گا۔ آخر دعوانا ان الحمد للہ رب العالمین۔
اس نے اپنے اجداد کے راستے کو چنا، مشکلیں برداشت کی، زندگی کے کٹھن مراحل سے گزرا، اور اس نے دنیا کو تبدیل کر دیا۔ امام خمینی، اسلام کا حقیقی علم بردار، جس نے اسلام محمدی کو دنیا بھر کو بتایا، دنیا بھر کے سامنے پریکٹیکلی پھیلایا۔ ملتمس حجت الاسلام سید ابو القاسم رضوی، جن کا تعلق آسٹریلیا سے ہے، کہ وہ گفتگو فرمائیں آج کے اس اہم ترین موضوع پر، دی مین ہو چینج دا ورلڈ۔
فضل اللہ المجاہدین علی القائدین اجرا عظیما، کہ خدا کا وعدہ ہے کہ مجاہدوں کو، قیام کرنے والوں کو فضیلت دے گا، اجر عظیم دے گا ان لوگوں کے مقابلے میں جو بیٹھے ہوئے ہیں، جو متحرک نہیں ہیں، جو ظلم کے خلاف قیام نہیں کرتے۔ اور یہ بھی تو اس کا وعدہ ہے کہ نرید ان نمن علی الذین استضعفوا فی الارض، کہ ہم ارادہ کر چکے ہیں کہ جنہیں زمین پر کمزور کر دیا گیا ہے ان پر احسانات کی بارش کریں گے۔ نجعلہم ائمہ و نجعلہم الوارثین، ہم انہیں قیادت دیں گے، امامت دیں گے اور وراثت دیں گے۔ ہاں عزیزو، اسلام ظلم کے خلاف قیام کی تعلیم دیتا ہے، مظلوموں کا ساتھ دینے کا حکم دیتا ہے اور پچھلی صدی کے اندر ایسا ہی ایک عظیم انقلاب امام خمینی نے برپا کیا. یقیناً یہ انقلاب 20ویں صدی میں 20th سینچری میں برپا ہوا، لیکن یہ انقلاب زمانے کے اعتبار سے 20th سینچری کے لیے رول ماڈل نہیں ہے. یہ انقلاب صرف ایران کے لیے نہیں تھا، یہ انقلاب پوری دنیا کے لیے تھا، اور پوری دنیا میں اس کی ایکو سنی گئی اور اس کے بعد پوری دنیا میں اسے ریکگنائز کیا گیا. جتنی مخالفت بڑھتی رہی اتنا یہ کامیاب ہوتا رہا. اور 28,000 سالہ ظالم حکومت کے خلاف قیام. امام خمینی بھی دوسروں کی طرح سے بیٹھ جاتے ہیں، حالات کے حوالے کر دیتے. بہت سے لوگ آج بھی کہتے ہیں دیکھیں ہمیں تو الحمدللہ نماز روزے ان دیگر چیزوں کی اجازت حاصل ہے، اس کے بعد ظلم ہو رہا ہے، خاموش بیٹھے ہوئے ہیں. قوم شعیب میں ایک بڑی تعداد پر عذاب اس لیے آئے کیونکہ وہ ظلم پر خاموش تھے، اور حسین والے کو تو قیام کرنا چاہیے. اور امام خمینی نے ایسی مثال قائم کی، 2500 سالہ حکومت کا خاتمہ کر دیا. مخالفتیں کیوں ہو رہی تھی جانتے ہیں آپ؟ لوگ ڈر رہے تھے کہ جب یہ 2500 سالہ حکومت کا انہوں نے ایران میں خاتمہ کر دیا تو ہماری حکومتوں کی خیر نہیں ہے. جنگ امپوز کر دی گئی. بڑی بڑی طاقتیں، بڑی بڑی حکومتیں 15 دن کی جنگ کے بعد ختم ہو جاتی ہیں. 8 سال کی جنگ، پوری دنیا ایک طرف، لیکن صبر، استقامت، یقین، یہ وہ طاقت تھی کہ جس نے ایران کو کامیابی دی، ترقی دی. قومیں اگر وظیفوں پہ پلتی ہیں تو کچھ عرصے کے بعد وہ ختم ہو جاتی ہیں، لیکن وہ قومیں ترقی کرتی ہیں جنہیں سختیوں اور آزمائشوں اور ابتلا سے گزارا جاتا ہے. اس کی مثال ایران ہے. سائنس کا میدان یہ صرف حوزے کا اور یہ امام وانوں کا اور روحانیین کا انقلاب نہیں ہے، یہ انقلاب پوری کائنات کے لیے. کس طریقے سے آپ یہ دیکھیں، تمام شعبہ زندگی میں یہ امام خمینی نے انقلاب برپا کیا ہے. سائنس میں آگے، ٹیکنالوجی میں آگے، سڑکوں کا انقلاب دیکھیں، دانشگاہ کا دیکھیں، کتابوں کا دیکھیں، میگزین کا دیکھیں، جرنل کا، ہر میدان میں ایران آگے. یہ انقلاب ہے نا، تبدیلی ہے. امام خمینی متواضع، جو شخص جنگ ایران کے موقع پہ 14 سالہ نوجوان کی بچے کی خبر آتی ہے تو کہتے ہیں کہ مجھے لوگ قائد نہ کہیں، رہبر نہ کہیں، یہ میرا رہبر ہے. ایسا متواضع دیکھا آپ نے؟ وہ امام خمینی پوری زندگی میں ایک موقع پر جب پوری قوم کو ضرورت ہے کہ کوئی کانفیڈنس سے ایسی بات کہی جائے، کہ پوری قوم نے استقبال کیا ہے، شاہ کا خاتمہ ہوا ہے، آپ ایران آئے ہیں 1979 میں، تو امام خمینی نے کہا من دولت را تعیین میکنم، من دولت را تعیین میکنم، من دولت را تعیین میکنم. بہشت زہرا میں یہ وہ کلمات تھے کہ جس کی وجہ سے پوری دنیا میں جو ہے نا کھلبلی مچ گئی. الحمدللہ 1979 سے لے کر آج 2021، 42 سال کا عرصہ انقلاب ترقی کر رہا ہے. اس میں شہداء کا خون شامل ہے، علماء کی قربانیاں شامل ہیں، ملت کا ایثار شامل ہے، آغا امام خمینی کی قیادت اور ان کے بعد آغا خامنئی کی قیادت شامل ہے. خداوند تعالیٰ آغا امام خمینی کے درجات بلند کرے اور آغا خامنئی کو طول عمر عطا فرمائے. ربنا تقبل منا انک انت السمیع العلیم.
A man who changed the world, father of the revolution, Imam Khomeini. Father Frank Galley from United Kingdom have degrees in philosophy, theology, and education from the University of London and Oxford University. He's an author of several books. He is an author of a very good book named Karbala Forever. Father of the Church of England, I would like to request Father Frank Julian Gailey.
So I want to thank the Ahlul Bayt Association for organizing this webinar. I'm going to speak about the man who changed the world, a man who started a revolution which was unlike any other. A revolution, the effects of which we are still enjoying today. The man, of course, is Imam Ayatollah Khomeini, and he was a man who inspired Muslims everywhere, because the Iranian Revolution was not just for Iran, for the people of Iran, but it was for Muslims everywhere. But also, when I say he inspired Muslims, he inspired also non-Muslims. And I consider myself as one of the people whom Imam Khomeini inspired. Because, yes, the revolution overthrew a tyrant, the Shah of Iran, who had no legitimacy, who did not rule by the consent of the people, but who ruled despotically, oppressing his own people. But the revolution had a worldwide aim. And the aim, which as a man of religion, you can see from the way I'm dressed, but I'm a priest, as a man of religion, do approve of this aim by the man who changed the world. And the aim was to put God again back at the center of life, not just personal life, not just inward personal life, but social life, the life of the people, the life of a community, the life of a nation, the life of society. Because the idea of Imam Khomeini was to establish something called a religious government, the government of God, at the heart of society. And this is a very essential aim, because if you believe in God, and you don't have to believe in God for God to exist, because God exists anyway. If you believe in God, you cannot feel that God is irrelevant. God is everything. God is at the center of everything. God rules the universe. God rules our lives. God is completely central, essential to everything which we do, everything which we as individuals, but also as a society. So the great insight, a great contribution of Imam Khomeini to the world, to society, to the human society, was to bring God back to the center. Now, I also want to say that when the revolution took place, there was still in existence a very bad type of government in the Soviet Union and beyond Soviet Union, which was called communism. And it was the key characteristic, the key feature of communism was atheism. And of course, Imam Khomeini wrote a personal letter to Gorbachev, who at the time was the prime minister, the president of the Soviet Union, and invited Gorbachev to discard communism, to discard this obsolete tyrannical ideology, to embrace, to discard atheism as well, and put God back into government. And incidentally, I mean, Gorbachev did not answer a particular invitation, but the Soviet Union collapsed sometime later. So I want to say that Imam Khomeini was instrumental in bringing down the despotic communist regime. But here in the West, because I'm speaking to you from London, here in the West, we don't have official atheism. We seem to, we just have a different kind of atheism. We have a more dangerous atheism, perhaps, which consists in ignoring God, in living as if God did not exist. pretending to live as if God did not exist. So, for example, when legislation is issued by parliament, by the government, God is left out. It's even worse, it's actually worse. Legislation is enacted which contradicts God's dictates. We have legislation passed by the parliament, the British parliament, which is antithetical, is in opposition to the dictates of God as revealed. For Muslims in the Quran, for us it is in the Bible. And there is, of course, an overlap between Bible and Quran. Say the Bible and also the teachings of a church, the Christian tradition, which are also part of what I would call the laws of Christianity. So what kind of society do you have when you have a society, the political organization of which contradicts the will of God? It's an absurdity, it's immoral. And actually, that leads me on to the next point I want to make, that ethics, the science of ethics, the science of morality, again, is fundamental because ethics provides a guide to life, how to live, how to conduct our lives, because people without a guide are rudderless, are adrift, are afloat in an ocean of nothingness, of relativism. They follow the dictates of drives and inclinations which are often contradictory to God's will. So ethics, again, Imam Khomeini provided a system of ethics or morality which enables people to walk the right way, to walk the way of the divine will. And that's very important. Ethics is one of my concerns. I've done postgraduate work in ethics at London University. So I realize how people around the people community where I live, the people of the great city of London, by and large, do not have guidance. They're not provided with guidance to how to live. And this is very tragic, very, very tragic indeed. I sometimes lead around a group of religious pilgrims, so I act as a guide. Not only as a religious guide, but also I tell them where to go, which trains to get on, where to get off, which places to see. So I do direct them around. But this is purely in individual personal terms. But society at large, but people at large do not have these directions. Nobody's telling them how to live. Okay, it's a personal choice, but a personal choice cannot be anarchical. A personal choice has to be in line with what is good for people at large, because sometimes people tragically do make the wrong choices. So Imam Khomeini is the man who changed the world, the man who was instrumental in the Iranian Revolution, a revolutionary par excellence. He was also providing his guidance. In Arabic, the word guidance is huda, which is very important in the Quran, isn't it? And he provided this guidance. And I, as a Christian, feel that the guidance of the people of the world, of the people of human community, we are all one ummah, one people. People should actually be given this guidance, should not be denied this guidance. This is a tragedy of life in the West, of large parts of the West. We are not given this guidance. The voice of the church is not listened to. The voice of the church very often is ignored. We have a great deal of corruption. Corruption, again, a very important category. Very great deal of disintegration or fragmentation in society. And we look at leaders to give us an example, a model on how to live righteously, how to live in a moral way, a way which is consonant with the will of God. And this is, in a way, a revolutionary task. A revolutionary task which still goes on. We should all be committed. I, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus Christ, and as someone committed to religious dialogue, especially with Islam, feel that it's an urgent task to show people how to live according to the will of God. And this should be translated into politics. Because again, a great mistake of rulers in the West, they think of politics as divorced from ethics, divorced from theology, divorced from religion. And that is an absurdity, because if God is the supreme being, the ruler of the universe, our creator, how can we logically and morally and humanly ignore, pretend that God did not exist? Ignore God. It's as if we ignore the air which surrounds us, as if like a fish ignoring the sea. The sea is what nourishes fishes. The air is what nourishes living beings, and we have to be. We cannot live without air, just as a fish cannot live without water. So, my friends, my good friends of the Ahlul Bayt Association, I want to say how glad I am to be given the chance to be speaking to you today and to honor this great leader, to honor the man who changed the world, to honor Ayatollah Khomeini, a great beacon of light in this world of darkness. Praise be to God, alhamdulillah, the Iranian revolution still exists, still is operative. And it has shown how you can have a country, a nation ruled by divine laws, but laws which are in a consonance with the will of God. I know the revolution has many enemies. Iran has many enemies around who would like to stifle, to destroy it, but they will not succeed, God will. And finally, I want to say, if I got any time, that Imam Khomeini also instituted Al-Quds Day, the Day of Jerusalem, which is very important because he was committed to the cause of Palestinian rights. And that is something which today we much care for, and we much need to proclaim and support and make sure that oppression and tyranny do not rule in Jerusalem. But once again, Jerusalem, the city of a free, great monotheistic religions should have a proper consideration in the sense by Christians, by Muslims, by Jews, should be ruled in that sacred and good way.
Imam Khomeini tried to warn the Soviet President Gorbachev against following the destructive path of Western liberal capitalism. The pro-Western path chosen after the collapse of the USSR turned out to be catastrophic for Russia and many of neighboring ex-Soviet republics. Sister Anastasia Fatima Azova is a Russian converted Muslim. She started searching Imam Khomeini and convinced that he is the man who changed the world. She wrote about Imam Khomeini. She's a very good speaker, very good writer, and she is now leading to Islamic education from Qom. And I'm really a great honor to warmly welcome her, Sister Fatima.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much for your kind invitation. I thank the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam Society in Portugal and all our respected guests for inviting me. Let me tell something about myself. I'm Fatima Anastasia Yuzhova. I'm a converted Russian from Moscow. I embraced Islam 22 years ago, and I became a Shia in 2003. And after I converted to Shiaism, I used to make my long research about different items in Shiaism, but particularly what led me to Shiaism and to the path of our Imams, alayhim salam. It was Imam Khomeini's heritage and his political philosophy and his path. Because I was very much involved into politics and in different political theories, and I worked as a journalist from my early student years, and that's why I was interested in Imam Khomeini's writings, and I started to study these writings from the years of my study at Moscow State University, the Faculty of Philosophy. After that, after graduating, I became a Muslim journalist. I worked for different projects, and now I'm an editor-in-chief of one project, internet website that is called Mihwar al-Muqawama. This is a site that is devoted to the history and culture and political movements of resistance in different Islamic countries, like, first of all, like Palestine, like Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Bahrain, Yemen, Iran, and naturally Iran, which is the source of this revolutionary thought and of the culture of resistance. We can say that the personality of Imam Khomeini is multidimensional, and of course he used to be a great philosopher, great scholar, a great faqih who used to study different Islamic sciences. Sorry. I used to study different Islamic. Imam Khomeini used to study different Islamic sciences on the profound level, and he was a high-ranked specialist in fiqh, and he has reached the level of mujtahid, and that's why we can analyze his personality from this perspective. But also he used to be a profound politician and a political leader and a poet and an ethical thinker and mystical thinker, an Irfani scholar and practicing mystic. And this is a question that arouses how we can combine all of these dimensions all together, because we can we count these features of Imam Khomeini's heritage like some separate stages that have no connection between each other, or it's just some kind of unity, some kind of unity that is logical inside of itself. Of course, we can say that, yes, the experience of Imam Khomeini in the sphere of Islamic sciences, of fiqh, has led him, and he was a great mujtahid. He has reached the highest level of Islamic knowledge and the degree of mujtahid and marja taqlid, and we can say that he has come to some conclusions that have led him to revolutionary path and political path. So one is interconnected with the other. And what about my research? It is the research of how we can justify this path from the perspective of Shia concepts and Shia beliefs and Shia fiqh. Because many of mujtahids before Imam Khomeini used to think that during the great occultation, Shias should just abstain from politics, because any kind of government is a usurper of Imam Mahdi's alayhi salam Farajahu Sharif of his rights, and that's why sheikhs shouldn't form a government, because it's a kind of usurpation, and they were outside of politics or loyal to some authorities of some countries. But Imam Khomeini was against this approach, and his concept was logical inside of itself. Because first of all, we should know that Islam is not just a religion in conventional sense of this word, because some people view at religion just as the means of supplicating, of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or of worshipping God inside of some religious institutions. But Islam is vice versa. Islam is based on monotheism, on worshipping God, but this worship, we perform this worship in all areas of our life. For example, in the political area, in economical area, in the area of war and peace, and Islam and Islamic law and Islamic fiqh and Islamic ethics regulate all these issues. And these issues are interconnected. For example, if we abandon some of these prescriptions, if we abandon this, we cannot follow other prescriptions. And this is an integrated system that needs some government, some governmental force to implement it. At least some force that has some political identity inside of the society, and the force that can compel people to observing justice and observing rights of other people according to Sharia. I will bring some examples from our ordinary life. For example, we have religious marriage and religious divorce. And the laws of this marriage and this divorce has a slight relation to state laws. It's a different thing. And we know that these institutions include some responsibilities and some rights. And unfortunately, due to the situation that many marriages are dissoluted nowadays, and unfortunately, Islamic world is not an exception, we face the situation when nobody can compel people to observe rights. For example, rights of ex-wives, rights of children from ex-marriages, and even some Islamic non-official Islamic authorities, non-governmental Islamic authorities, when they face this situation that a former husband doesn't want to pay nafaka, for example, for an ill child, a child who suffers from some disease, his own child who needs an operation, and he refuses and tells that he has a new family and he doesn't want. Even some offices of some mujtahis cannot compel him to do these things. As well as it is also related to some economical issues and issues that unfortunately some brothers and sisters become involved into haram operations, into haram economical operations. And thus our iman and the spiritual health and ethical health of our Muslim society just dissolutes. And as for Imam Khomeini, he insisted that this system of Islamic laws and the aim of Islamic laws and ethical prescriptions is justice, because justice is the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the aim of Islamic laws is just to reach this justice. And Imam Khomeini insisted that for implementing this justice, this system of Islamic laws, we need a government, an Islamic government headed by a personality who has reached the highest degree of piety, the highest degree of justice, and the highest degree of Islamic knowledge and organizational possibilities. But it is not a kind of monarchy, and Imam Khomeini didn't view at the topic like this. It's a great mistake to miss this system with monarchy, because Imam Khomeini was against this system of power. When one person gains this absolute power and transfers it to his children, it's not right, it's not just. And Imam Khomeini criticized greatly this system of state, and he objected to it. And he insisted that this Islamic government that is headed by Wali al-Faqih, by the most pious and knowledgeable Islamic jurist, at the same time, it should rely on people, on believers, on ordinary people, and their desires, their aims, and what they need. If it doesn't come into contradiction with the Holy Sharia. And this is like Imam Khomeini viewed the structure of society. Here the question arises about the called usurpation of the rights of Imam Mahdi, alayhi salam, ajalallahu farajahu sharif. And Imam Khomeini tells that no, it's not a kind of usurpation. If we analyze the lives of our infallible alayhi salam, we just see many examples that they didn't desire any power, any state power for itself. State power, governmental power, political power was just the means of implementing these Sharia laws, these Islamic laws, this justice in society. And if we refer to Imam Ali's, alayhi salam, sayings and khutbahs, he used to tell about this, to say it directly, and to describe this political power just as the means of establishing justice and the laws of God. And if the aim of the revolution of Imam Khomeini was just the same, it means that this Islamic government and this Islamic system, it is just the means of providing these aims of infallibles, alayhim salam. It means that it is the government of Imam Mahdi, alayhi salam, himself. And this is the logic of Imam Khomeini's doctrine. Here the question arises that Muslims live in different countries of the world, and what should we do if, for example, Muslims and Shias live in a non-Islamic society, non-Muslim society? Can they compel people to live under this Islamic rule? And the doctrine of Imam Khomeini gives us a direct answer that no, only when society is prepared for this government, and when they desire this government, and when they understand that they should obey to these laws, then we can establish this Islamic government in this society. And after the revolution, because we know from historical accounts and books and memories that most of Iranian population hated Shah, and they hated this American presence in Iran, and they just saluted the revolution. Of course, in the anti-Shah movement, there were different trends. both left-wing, liberal, and different trends, and also secular. But most of people just participated in some voting, and they voted for the Islamic Republic. They chose this Islamic Republic for themselves. If we refer to the practice of political Shiaism in different countries of the world, the experience of Shia political movements in other countries. So we see that Hezbollah in Lebanon, who is the spiritual child of Imam Khomeini's revolution, and they always underline this, and they explain this. They refused of committing some kind of Islamic revolution in Lebanon because it's a multi-confessional society, because some people, many of Lebanese people are not prepared for this scenario. That's why they do participate in political and social and economical life, but they do it by other means, and they just use this political thought of Imam Khomeini, not directly copying the Iranian experience, but applying it to the Lebanese soil. What does it mean? It means that the key idea of Imam Khomeini's thought is that Islam and the Islam of infallibles, alayhim salam, is a provider of world justice. And justice has to oppose oppression and tyranny. And this is the path of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And according to Imam Khomeini's thought, now American world order and different American administrations and this world capitalism, it's a great tyranny. It's a great Yazid of our time. What about Zionist regime? It's just a part of this great cancer tumor. So if this American world order is a kind of cancer, so Zionist regime is just a small metastatic tumor. It's very dangerous and it should be eliminated, but it's just a part of this great project as well as takfirism. So Imam Khomeini thought that Muslims cannot abstain of this situation. They should resist this injustice, and this is the world injustice from which not only Muslims but non-Muslims also suffer from this injustice, and that's why we can recall the saying of Imam Ali alayhi salam that people of two kinds, they are either your brothers in faith or your brothers in your human nature. So Imam Khomeini's thought wasn't against other confessions, other religions, other people, other nations. It was against this American world order and its direct political and economical presence in Shah's Iran. He viewed Iran, Islamic Iran, as an occupied country, occupied by this unjust government of Pahlavi, by this American presence and Zionist influence. And he wanted his own country to get freed from this influence and this presence in all areas, in political area, in economical area, in war area. And I think that he, by the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he succeeded. Because nowadays Iran, Islamic Republic, faces different problems, and it faces different sanctions and also secret defense war and after that economical pressure and problems. But nevertheless, Iran is independent in its policy, in its economy, in its cultural life, and it resists against any kind of this foreign pressure. It doesn't mean that Iran is against other nations, other religions. So these things are different. If we refer to the experience of Hezbollah in Lebanon, we see that they follow this key idea to resist injustice, to be ahead of this front of resistance, both against Zionist, racist, and apartheid regime and occupation, and both against tech-free project and this cruel and anti-human project, which also was the means of this providing this American interests and American influence in the region. And as for implementing justice and implementing Islamic laws, we see that in Lebanon, Hezbollah has some capabilities of doing this. And of course, it's not a state power, but they do not want to apply it to other, for example, other confessional groups. Only Shias are subjected to these laws, and they can manage this justice in their community. And they present in the state structure. And for example, we know that in the last elections, latest elections, Hezbollah included their point of fighting corruption, economical corruption, and injustice in the Lebanese state. So they, by the means of this military power and political power, they achieve these goals, and they follow the path of Imam Khomeini. So I just brought this example because it is close to my experience, to my project, the items of my own project. And I just wanted to show that if some people in some countries call themselves the followers of Imam Khomeini, the followers of Wilayatul Faqih, it doesn't mean they want to perform some kind of Islamic revolution in their country, in their society. No. Only when this society is ready for this revolution, socialists can perform it. But they can spread trends, spread ideas, spread information about Islamic laws, both Islamic laws and both the situation in the world. Because we know that the world is full of injustice, and Imam Mahdi alayhi salam is the one who will bring this ultimate justice to all countries and continents of the world. But now we see that the world is far from this state. We have just some islands, beautiful islands of resisting this unjust world order. And one of the pillars of this resistance is ultimately, certainly it's the Islamic Republic. If Imam Khomeini didn't commit this brilliant revolution, I think we would have no resistance in Lebanon, no serious resistance in Palestine, but because we used to have some groups who fight it against Israel, but they didn't succeed in all the wars that occurred before Islamic Revolution. And we should take into our mind that Soviet Union was one of the most powerful states of the world, used to help them, but they didn't succeed. But after the Islamic Revolution, the resistance, who was armed with this divine ideology of Islamic Revolution, it succeeded in many areas, both in the liberation of South Lebanon in 2000 and the July War in 2006, and against terrorist groups, and against, for example, against Daesh in Iraq. And also we see that in Yemen, and this small and very oppressed country, despite all the calamities, all the deaths and epidemics, despite the total destruction, they succeeded in opposing this Saudi aggression. And now this Saudi coalition and Saudi Arabia just seeks for reaching to some commitment. Of course, it was unpredictable for them that these small and poor people of Yemen will resist during 6 years in very catastrophic situation. And this is the power of Islamic revolution. This is the power of this pillar of Islamic Republic that helps the oppressed nations and oppressed and the resistance movements in the region. And these resistance movements, they defend their lands, they defend their countries. Of course, if not the Islamic revolution, I think that the situation would be more drastic in all countries of the Islamic world, because Americans would succeed more in this state. And moreover, when we speak about religious awakening, about the Islamic awakening, and we should understand that even when these movements are not Shia, when these movements are just Islamic, they represent other creeds, our Sunni brothers and sisters. Most of these political movements, most of these Islamic movements are inspired by Imam Khomeini, by his path, by his revolution, by his success. It is very, very much inspiring. And people and Muslims began to create different kinds of movements, both armed movements and not armed movements, just parliamentary blocks, just some charitable organizations. But they understood that they can participate in politics, and they can succeed, and they can just make their ideas alive in the political area, in the economical area, and in the society. That's why I think that the Islamic revolution and the brightest personality of Imam Khomeini, rahimahullah, it just caused a great impact upon the whole world and the whole region. And I think that as we have such a phenomenon that many people in different countries convert to Islam, they become Muslims, and the Islamic world becomes wider and wider and wider, and there are strong Muslim communities, and both Sunni and Shia, in traditionally non-Islamic countries. We think that the ideology of Imam Khomeini and his path will gain more adepts and more followers in different countries of the world, and his doctrine can be applied by different ways in this country. And of course, we should study the works of Imam Khomeini, his scientific works, his scholarship, his fiqh of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, his fatwas, his political experience, his path. And I think that if we study it deeply, we will discover new dimensions of this heritage by the passage of time. course it's very deep and very inspiring and full of different lessons. And, I would like to thank you for your attention and once again to thank our brothers and sisters and organizers of this conference who have honored me by inviting me to this conference. Thank you very much. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with all of you and accept your prayers and your fasting and all your efforts on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and infallibles alayhim salam who served this path and such scholars like Imam Khomeini rahimahullah Quddisa.
Imam Khomeini changed the word for peace. Imam Khomeini changed the word for dignity. Imam Khomeini changed the word for harmony.